right, people, we back. Victory and Vices podcast. Me, Boris, with James Beckham, Henry. We'll be united again, and we got all the news and views in the football world. Okay, so it's International Week. It's not our favourite week to discuss. There's actually very little that's gone on thus far, but we figured we'd give you a podcast nonetheless because we're good guys like that. So the first talking point we wanted to go over, we were talking about it earlier in our WhatsApp group, was Jack Grealish. Now, Jack Grealish, if you didn't see him perform against Arsenal, well, it was quite frankly one of the best footballing performances I've seen in a long time. He absolutely dominated that Arsenal midfield to the point Thomas Partey faked an injury and went off at half-time because he just couldn't handle him. Now, Grealish should be a starter as far as I'm concerned in that the England side. But there's a young man called Mason Mount that seems to be favoured above him. Now, lads, I'll let you take over and give me your opinion on it. Why do you think Gareth Southgate just doesn't rate Jack Grealish for whatever reason?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think I read an article earlier on entitled "What Makes Jack Grealish Special?" And that for me was an incredible thing to read because he isn't special. There's not much special about him. He's got a bit of ability, and he can carry his team, but Messi is special. Ronaldo is special, and the reason I'm highlighting this article is because in the Premier League or with English players, we tend to, or the English media tends to assign these tags on certain players, and so when those players get overlooked for whatever reason, it tends to get made a bigger deal of than perhaps it should be, because Jack Grealish, whilst he's a good player, and I would probably put him ahead of Mason Mount and some other players, it's not like he's left out Harry Kane and picked Tammy Abraham. He is still in the mix with other players. I think for me, one of the more surprising aspects was, I think we'll come on to this a little bit later, but Jude Bellingham getting called up ahead of people like James Maddison or Harvey Barnes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Jack Grealish, it is surprising. I think he is better than Mason Mount, who also I don't think is in the squad either. But I don't know what it is with Gareth Southgate. I think there was an issue with Jack Grealish during lockdown. I'm not going to try and sit here and suggest that that's the reason he's not getting picked, because frankly, England wouldn't have a team if that was the reason. So it's a strange one. I do find it strange he's not in the squad, because when they play in games at times, as we've seen against Belgium, we saw against Denmark, they find it hard to pick a lock in defences. And Jack Grealish is certainly a player who can help to do that.
Yeah. Reece kind of pointed out something I was going to come on to, and I think it's kind of linked to Gareth Southgate's sort of system and the way he sets up. It's a little bit baffling sometimes, and whilst they have played some games where sort of Mount has played in behind, Foden's done the same, and you wonder why Grealish isn't getting similar opportunities. We look at some of the lineups that he's had. I can't remember. I think it might have been against. Was that Belgium or Denmark, where they played very defensive. They played, I think it was Declan Rice and Calvin Phillips in midfield two, and then they had sort of left and right wing backs then following up with the front three of Kane, Sterling and Rashford. I think it was Sancho. So when he plays in that sort of system, obviously he's not going to get anywhere near, he's not going to get into that front three. He just doesn't fit when you've got Kane, Rashford, Sterling, etc. And then if Gareth Southgate's playing that kind of system behind where he's got those two defensive midfield players, he's not really, he's picking that ball inside. And like Reece said, he doesn't pick teams sometimes to pick a lock. And if you don't pick teams to pick a lock, then Jack Grealish is rendered a little bit pointless sometimes. So I think he is a little bit of a victim of Southgate's system at times. But as you both mentioned, the fact that he's not even really in the squad, not even on the bench, for the opportunity, perhaps if Southgate changed the system, then you'd look to Grealish, to pick that lock. But the fact he's not even in the squad, there's big question marks over that, because I do rate him. I rate him well. Like Reece said, Sky Sports, they've over-egged it, saying he's special. He's not special. He's just a good player, a good young player. So the fact he's not getting in, it's a bit strange.
I think with system, you pointed out, obviously, the way that Gareth Southgate likes to play, obviously one thing he won't stray away from is a 5 at the back. And I don't know why he sticks with that system in certain games, but that's the way he likes to play. Agree with it or not, that's unlikely to change. What that means is you can either line up with a 5-2-1-2 or a 5-2-2-1. Now, if you're trying to get Kane and Sterling in that team, which probably are going to be the two first names on the team sheet, then there is no place for an attacking midfielder. So the question becomes, can Jack Grealish play in more of a defensive or hold-in role? And he can't. I don't think so. Or at least if I was picking someone to play in that position, then I would be picking people like Declan Rice ahead of him. That's not to say that that's his strongest lineup. I think if you look at the way he plays the 5 at the back with Kyle Walker as a centre-half, I think we saw in the Man City versus Liverpool game on the weekend, and especially after the comments that Roy Keane made about Kyle Walker, his defensive ability has been called into question time and time again. And then, you've got the other defenders, of course, and the fact that he plays often a right back, even Trippier out of position at left back. So really, I don't think Gareth Southgate covers himself in glory. I think he got exceptionally lucky at the World Cup. And he's continued to get lucky ever since. And his luck will run out.
Yeah.
To fit someone like a Grealish in, you need to really be looking at a 4-3-3 or a 4-2-3-1, something like that kind of system. And if you were to collate all the lineups that Southgate has played since he took over, I'm not really sure he's done that all that often. And like Reece said, that's not really the way he sets up, and it's not likely to change. So, and luckily for Grealish, it just doesn't really fit into what Southgate's plans are.
Yeah. And it's all very well and good going 10 years, as England did, without losing a game at home, or a game at all in the qualifiers. And they went 10 years and with this exceptional record. But it's all very well and good doing that. But you've got to know how to set up against teams who are your equals, and they don't.
Yeah, England have never known what to do with creative players, have they? They had the whole Scholes, Gerrard, Lampard conundrum. When Gaza was there, they didn't really know what to do with Gaza. You look at Spain, for example, now. Spain, the national team, is not what it used to be. It's, on paper, it's quite a weak team. They would absolutely kill for a Grealish and a Foden or Maddison. I just don't know why Gareth Southgate in certain games where you're defending against teams that like to play deep, like you said, Reece, and you need to pick a lock. Play a player like Grealish. His ball carrying ability, like just on the weekend watching him against Arsenal, is just phenomenal. And the way he just dribbles past players is quite frankly incredible. And I'm going to throw it out there. I don't know if it's personal with Gareth Southgate and Grealish. I honestly don't know. But I can't quite work out why you would have someone of that quality and just not use them. An interesting comment was made a while back by Bonlaho. And I got taken out of context quite a bit because, like you said, lads, the sort of media tend to overhype things. They look for that clickbait headline. And Bonlaho basically said that Grealish reminded him of Iniesta. And he is right in a sense that there are parallels. Obviously, Iniesta's a freak, right? Like, the guy is a one-off. He's a complete generational talent. You might not see another Iniesta for a long, long time. But the way they run with the ball, the way they operate in tight spaces, the way they pick out a pass, vision, things like that, there are parallels, and it's sad that England don't use him. I think it really is. Grealish obviously turned down Republic of Ireland. He wanted to come and play for England, did a bit of a Declan Rice in that respect. And, he set his heart on playing for England, and now he's got a manager that doesn't know how to use him, or quite frankly, doesn't want to use him. So, yeah, he is in the squad for the games coming up. Whether he plays or not, I mean, look, I wouldn't be putting money on him playing anytime soon if Southgate's got that 5 at the back. So, Aston Villa fans, let us know obviously your opinion on it, because your opinion is key. What do you think in Grealish and Southgate? Obviously, Southgate ex-Villa as well. So, yeah, let us know your opinions on it. Going back to internationals, and another strange one that we were discussing before we came on is Aymeric Laporte. Now, for those of you who don't know, Aymeric Laporte, I think we'd all probably agree when he's fit and he's on form, he's one of the top 5 defenders in the world. Would you say that, lad? He's in that bracket?
Oh, absolutely not.
Ooh, would you not?
No, there's...
Name me 4 of the better ones.
He's a good player, but I don't know if you could necessarily say that he is absolutely clearly... in some people's opinion, maybe, but I don't know if you could say he's clearly head and shoulders above everyone else. So, I mean, if you look at the France squad, like you said, he's not being capped. Why? I mean, he's been at Bilbao before Man City, and he did okay. You know, he did well. He made his move to Man City, and whilst he has been decent for Manchester City, you have to admit it hasn't quite happened for him. It hasn't quite. I mean, there have been considerable issues with his fitness. He has been out injured for long periods of time. And he has made City better as a team when he has played. But you might have to look at the players he is playing with and ask yourself, does he not stand out because the players around him are so poor?
To a degree, you could say so, yeah. But I think, don't forget, the same guy was part of the 100-point season where they won everything and they cleaned up. For him to not even have one French cap is, quite frankly, awful. And there's something personal between him and Deschamps that shouldn't exist. Because with all due respect, you got players like Sacco getting caps over him. That shouldn't happen.
Well, I mean, there are players like Clement Longley and Samuel Umtiti and Varane and Kimpembe, who are all European pedigree, playing in the latter stages of the Champions Leagues, and this is a French squad that are come off the back of a Euro 2020 final and a World Cup win. So whatever system that Deschamps has got and whatever players he's playing with are working. And I understand that you do have to take measures to freshen up a squad, but whatever's happening for them is working, and they've got the correct combination of players. So I don't necessarily know if it's as straightforward as just chuck Laporte in because he's made one appearance for City this season.
No, I think we look more at the bigger picture. I think you've been a little bit harsh on Laporte there, Reece. Outstanding criticisms, but yes, he has been quite injury prone. But I don't think many would argue with the fact that when he has played, and he has had some periods of where he strung games together, and he drastically improves that City defence. And yes, you made the point that that City defence isn't all that. But I think if anything, it's more sign of how good somebody is when they come in and improve that defence rather than how bad everybody else is. And I'm not disagreeing. Again, you raise good points. They won the World Cup. They got to the European final. He's obviously doing things well, very well, Deschamps. But it doesn't mean that you can't improve on that. And it doesn't mean that Laporte, we're saying, needs to be in that squad. He should be starting every game. Why is he picking these players? Varane is world class. Kimpembe, Clement Longley, and Umtiti. I'm not sure I agree with that as much. But it's not to say that the question I think we're asking is, or Spoon is asking, is why is he not even being considered? Why is he not in the conversation? You're looking at players like Sacco, Kurt Zouma. He should be in that squad. Yes, maybe not this season because he's only played one game, but over the last couple of years, from his days in Bilbao and the earlier parts of Man City, even if he's just coming on as subs or playing the odd game, the fact that he's not even being selected is bizarre. Again, it's another bizarre one.
Let me play devil's advocate with you. I mean, if you're a nation like France, we tend to group countries like England in that equation. But really speaking, France, perhaps to a certain extent, Belgium, but definitely countries like Spain, Germany, they tend to breed excellence. And they have the ability not to select world-class players because there are so many world-class players in those positions. Now, if you take Aymeric Laporte as an example of this, he didn't play top-level football until Man City. He played at Bilbao, and they may have gone Champions League, once in a blue moon, but realistically, he wasn't playing at the business end of massive competitions until he got to City. And yes, like you say, he has been good for Man City, and his performances have warranted a cap, and why he's not in that conversation is a mystery. However, they're also sending out the message of saying, okay, you can play 3 or 4 games in a row well for Man City, great. But I want to see you be able to do that over an 8, 9, 10 game spell. And he can't seem to do that. And what good is it building a team around a centre-half like Aymeric Laporte if he can't play 8 games in 8 weeks, let alone 8 games in 20 days, which is what you would have in a major tournament? So realistically, that is where the issue may lie for Didier Deschamps. Perhaps he's thinking, yeah, okay, this guy is really good, but can I rely on him?
You've got to then apply that to Varane as well. Because Varane has had an absolute meh with Real Madrid this season. He's consistently injured. When he plays, he is absolutely woeful. If you're basing it on form, Varane doesn't get near that squad. No, and also Kimpembe as well hasn't been great too.
I think Kimpembe has. I think Kimpembe has been good.
Have you seen PSG in the Champions League?
Yeah, they've been poor this season, but I don't think that's been Kimpembe's fault. I think I was incredibly impressed with Kimpembe in the latter stages of the Champions League last year, and even with their subpar performances this year, I don't think Kimpembe's been bad at all.
Nah, it's not for me, bro. Not for me. I don't. If you're saying to me Kimpembe and then,
right,
no. Sorry, Becky, go on, bro.
No, I was just going to say that the thing is with Laporte is he has his injury-prone periods where he doesn't string together many games, but when he is injury-free, I don't see why Deschamps can't really sort of look at him and kind of say, okay, we'll take him. He's not going to start, but he's on the bench, whereas the last half an hour, last 20 minutes, he can come on. He can come on and he can take the place of McCarthy. He can take the place of Varane. And he might not have the fitness to play the whole 90 minutes, but he's got that quality that when we want to give the other ones a rest, we're not bringing on the people like Kurt Zouma when we can bring on a Laporte. I get the whole injury thing, and some managers, they don't want to pick players that aren't reliable, and I get that, but I think that he should be given more of an opportunity at least to prove something, whether it be 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah, but if the selection criteria is simply they need to have a prolonged run of good form, then he hasn't had that, I don't think, in his whole career.
Well, bear in mind now, they won the title and he was ever present in that.
I think Gareth Southgate was going to take Rashford and Kane to the Euros this year, and they would only just come back from injury. So sometimes
England do not breed excellence. Like I said, we tend to put them in the same bracket, but they are not in the same bracket because they don't pick the correct players and they don't get the correct results.
Interesting. Obviously, Man City fans, let us know as well. We want your opinion too. Should Laporte be in there? I imagine a lot of you will say yes, though. I also imagine a lot of City fans will be happy that he's home, resting up, chilling, ready for the rest of the season. But yeah, certainly is a good debate to have. And you're right, Reece, France. They could pick anywhere near 2-3 teams. We got to remember Benzema completely got excluded after the whole sex tape issue with Valbuena. So yeah, they're not scared to remove players as they see fit. Yeah, interesting. Those are the two kind of standouts from the internationals that we were looking at. Moving on to another international player that kind of mixes with the club situation a little bit is Megan Rapinoe. Now, I mentioned it to the lads before we came on, and obviously you two didn't know an awful lot about it, but I was staying abreast of the story, so to speak. Now, Megan Rapinoe came out, and they used the word attack Manchester United, which, to a degree, she sort of did. So Megan Rapinoe basically came out, and she criticised Manchester United, and she said, why was it only in 2018 that you decided to invest in a women's football team? And it obviously goes back to things like, quality and various other things. I kind of get where she's coming from to a degree. What's your take on it, Reece, initially?
Well, just when you think that 2020 can't surprise you anymore, Megan Rapinoe whinges about gender equality. She's got a track record for doing it, to the point where when somebody bangs on about the same thing for so long without making any genuine good points, it starts to invalidate the things that they say. My take on this would be that in its most pure and simple form, and of course Manchester United would never admit this, but the reason that they haven't set up a women's team till now, of course, that women's teams exist, and I don't know why Man United are the exception to this rule. But the reason is because it's not an overly profitable thing. Women's football is not widely supported. It is not widely broadcasted. It's not widely publicised. It's not widely liked, if we're being honest. And so for a club like Manchester United, the brand that they have, do they want to then stake that on a football team? Doesn't matter what gender or sex or anything is in that team, on something that people don't really care about. So whilst they wouldn't admit it, the reason is probably simply because it doesn't turn enough for profit. And Manchester United is run like a business.
Yeah, and another interesting aspect of Rapinoe's comments here is I don't really get the timing, because it's one thing saying why have a club at Manchester United not got a women's football team, but she's saying it after they've now created the football teams. It's almost like bringing issue with something that, do you know what I mean, that they've already kind of tried to solve now. So it's like Manchester United they've looked at it now, and women's football is growing. It is slowly growing, but it's growing faster than it has in the past. It is getting more traction, and much more efforts are being made to get it out there. And Manchester United have obviously looked at that and kind of gone, okay, the time is right. We should perhaps now try and introduce a women's football team. But I don't really get Megan Rapinoe saying, well, it's only now you're doing it. All right, but they've done it though, So it's not like they didn't have a football team and she's gone, well, why hasn't a club that size got a women's football team? I would get that. I'd get that more. But yeah, the fact that she's mentioned this now, it could be anybody. It doesn't have to be just Megan Rapinoe. Anybody saying why have they only just brought this out now? It's like, well, yeah, okay, I get that, but they have this team now. Do you know what I mean? So they've realised that they haven't got a women's football team, and they've tried to put that right. So leave it be, let it develop.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, I'm interested. Sorry,
some people are just genuinely never happy, and I think there are two types of people on this debate, on the female side at least, or at least arguing for the female side, and that is the type of people who want discrimination or perceived discrimination to end, which is the outcome that everyone wants. And we can talk about the business of football and the finances and the popularity and the media and everything that surrounds that. But the ultimate end goal is that we want discrimination to be eradicated from all forms of life. There is the second camp who want the perceived negative discrimination that female athletes face to be overturned almost and be turned into positive discrimination, and for things to be forced upon the game of football, for example, where clubs are forced to set up teams for women, despite the fact that there's no real call for that. There's no real fan base for it. You wouldn't set up a business making cakes if no one wanted cakes, for example. I might be being harsh. My point is simply, why are you calling for there to be mandatory women in sport, women on a panel, women? That's positive discrimination. And yes, it can tip the balances of the scales, and that is a whole other argument to itself. But she falls into the positive discrimination camp. And I think there'll be a lot of people out there who disagree with her and say, well, actually, there shouldn't be any discrimination. If a woman is going to be in sport, if a female team is going to be successful, then they probably need to do that by themselves, free from discrimination. And that's not what she's saying.
Yeah, interesting. From a business standpoint as well, Reece, you made a good point about it. I mean, where do you draw the line as a business then? So this has kind of been forced upon you. You might not really have a market for it or an audience for it. How much money do you put into that? Because at some point, they do operate as a business. I know Manchester United are in a ton of debt, right, for example. But, as a business, you want to be in the green. So where do you draw the line? How much money do you put in? Do you share a stadium? Do they get their own stadium? Do you start spending money on transfer fees? Do you don't? What do you do with wages? A lot of these women now want an equal percentage in terms of pay. But the harsh reality is, like you said, Reece, no one's broadcasting it. So where's that money coming from? There isn't really a market for it, unfortunately. There isn't a market for everything.
Unfortunately, all things being equal, Manchester United would have to have a female football team with the female athletes, as Megan Rapinoe wants, being paid £500,000 a week, just to mirror what some of the Man United players are earning. And then the fans would be charged about £50 each per game to get into the stadium, because that is the same amount as the male team gets on the gate. And you can apply that logic throughout the club. And that only amounts to one thing. And that amounts to Manchester United losing one hell of a lot of money really, really quickly. And unfortunately, what she's saying, she's trying to put a lot of pressure on a lot of big organisations to try and make change. And I applaud her for doing it. But she must know deep down that what she's saying is not sustainable. And it would, if all these things that she's asking for get immediately put into the game, then the women's game will crumble.
Yeah. The women's game, I don't know why Manchester United actually got rid of their original women's team. I'd have to go away and find that out. I can only assume that there was a lack of interest, or there was a lack of just funds made available to it. But I think it was around the late 2000s it folded. Then it came back again about a decade later. So I get what she's saying. Like, obviously in America, culturally as well, there's a big demand for youth soccer and girls especially. They play it a lot and it's big business. But in the UK, it's not really there. Like, I mean, we'll be honest, lads, let's be straight down the middle. There aren't a lot of women's football teams. Once a lot of women reach a certain age that we would all know, how many of them have said, I'm really looking forward to play football this weekend? They might watch it, but none of them are really playing it.
It's true. And look, there's about, 12 clubs in the MLS? Maybe 24 if you're talking about different conferences and things. Either way, there'd be about, between 16 and 20 teams in the Premier League in the UK. And then you compare the populations of the two countries. So we've got to fill 20 teams with women in the US with a population of, however many million people live in the States. And then there's a small fraction of that number living in the UK. And it's a chicken and egg situation. What came first, a lack of interest or a lack of talent?
Yeah. No, it's very true. It's interesting. Obviously, a lot of when me and Becky did the Megan Rapinoe video a while back, a lot of fans got in touch with us about it. And again, get in the comments below. Let us know your opinions on it. Whether you're American, you're female, male, no matter what you identify as, we don't particularly care. We just want to talk sport. So yeah, it's an interesting topic. People get in touch with us, and we'll discuss it further. Moving on to some transfer stuff. David Alaba, as we were all trying to pronounce his name earlier on, he's rejected his Bayern contract, and it looks like there's going to be a free-for-all come the summer. Again, lads, he's a very good player, and I think we discussed him a lot in the podcast previously, and just how good he is, whether he's at centre-back or left-back or even central midfield. He's that versatile. If he was to leave Bayern, could you see him come into the Premier League?
Well, I mean, look, first of all, David Alaba is and has been a very, very consistent top-level player for Bayern Munich for quite some time. And I would not like to say anything to discredit any of his achievements to date and his ability. But as I'm sure we're all aware, he is not as young as he used to be. And there are players in that Bayern Munich team who are, wanting to come and take his job, essentially. And he might have been told in contract negotiations, he might have been told, look, that's fine. You can have 200 grand in wages like you want, but you're going to have to concede that, we've got people like Lucas Hernandez, or we've got people like, Pavard, or, Joshua Kimmich in central midfield, Alphonse Davies at left back. These players are going to get in ahead of you. And he, perhaps he wants to play first team football. Perhaps it is a money issue. We just don't know. But Bayern Munich are not in a position where they can be bent over a barrel, because they are the best team in Europe and they've got a lot of cover.
Yeah, they're so well run as well. Just going back to what you're saying there about them being the best team in Europe. Sorry to cut you off, Becky. The same thing with Thiago. Thiago wanted an astronomical wage, and they said no, it's fine. If you want to leave, go leave. We'll keep moving without you. And the Alaba situation is progressing the same again. I think it is down to money, Reece, from what I gather. I think Bayern said something along the lines of his agent was quite greedy, and he wants too much. Alaba is kind of caught in the middle, where he doesn't want to necessarily displease Bayern fans, but at the same time, he's got to do what's best for him. And Bayern are so well run, like you said, Reece, that they just don't bend, they don't break, they don't fold. They're like, if you don't want what we can offer, feel free to try your hand somewhere else.
Yeah, and what's great for Bayern Munich and isn't so great for David Alaba is how much depth they have. And it's not just depth, it's strength in positions. And Reece mentioned, or I think it might have been useful to mention, where he can play and where he has played. Left back, centre half, holding midfield. He's very versatile. And I think it's worth remembering, he is only 28. So he's not really, we wouldn't consider that old. As a left back, he's still very much in his prime. But the issue that Alaba has is, you mentioned they got Alphonso Davies, obviously playing down the left-hand side, and the midfield options that they've got are fantastic. So you can see why he's sort of been playing lately in the centre-half position. And I don't know the ins and outs as to why he's rejected his contract, but perhaps that's not where he wants to play. And you guys also mentioned that Bayern Munich, there's no leverage here for him because they're run so well and they have such good options that I think the only way for him is out. Where he goes, I'm not really that sure. I'm pretty sure he won't be short on offers. You're looking at teams in the Premier League who wouldn't want him. That's an option for them. Unless you're being priced out of it, you'd be stupid not to be in the market for him. But he's one of those. He's 28. He's still very much in his best years. If you're buying him and he stays injury free, you've got 3-4 years, I would say, still good years out of him. So he could go PSG, he could go Juve, he could go City, Liverpool, Inter Milan. He could go anywhere. So I'd be hard pushed to try and even predict anywhere he's going, but I think he'd be very welcome in the Premier League and he'd be a good addition.
I think it would be brave for him to go to the Premier League. I think that he would be exposed defensively in ways that he hasn't been used to in the Bundesliga. I'm not saying he hasn't been competent in the Champions League over the years, but I think there is a difference between playing Champions League matches at the business end of tournaments and then playing against Chris Wood at Burnley. I think it's just a different kind of challenge that you don't get on the continent. I would love to see him in the Prem. And I think his versatility could bring things to clubs like Chelsea or Manchester United that would be more than welcome. But is he brave enough to do it? I would doubt it.
Do you know what it all boils down to, though? Is money, lads. Again, that's what it's going to boil down to.
The safe option is always PSG, isn't it? For people when they're leaving the likes of Madrid, Barca, Bayern Munich. The safe option is PSG, isn't it? Because if you're that good, what can really go wrong? You're playing against people who work in the trade in the week. They're all plumbers, electricians. That's what they really are, aren't they? So little can go wrong, isn't it? If, like Reece said, we'd love to see him in the Prem. Has he got the bottle to make the move? Because it is the riskiest decision, you see.
Yeah, we will see. If I was to put money on it, I would say either Liverpool at centre-back or City at left-back. But yeah, that's going to be really interesting over the next couple of months. Obviously, we'll keep everybody posted on it, and we'll keep an eye on it. Just obviously round off some Bundesliga news as well, because we didn't actually go over it earlier. Was Reece, Jude Bellingham, like you said, Jude Bellingham got into the England squad. I think he's going to be potentially the third youngest English player ever. We said at the time Dortmund was the right move for him. He's played a lot of football. He's done okay. He's not done that bad. He played in the Champions League as well. He's played a lot of football in the Bundesliga. He has come in now again over established players like Harvey Barnes, James Maddison, people like that. Another Southgate selection that kind of has people curious, shall I say. So again, just your take on that, lads, on Bellingham and his selection.
I think it underlines a point that James made earlier on. With Jude Bellingham, I think, look, he has got talent, and a lot has been made of Birmingham's reaction to him leaving. They obviously thought, big things of him. But the guy is 17 years old, and 17 years old is a young age to accept pressure of playing for England and to know what to do with the responsibility of being able to do it. That being said, if we're talking about his, if it's warranted for him being in the squad, he has played one 90-minute match for Dortmund. So I would question the selection. I would question the message it sends out to people like Harvey Barnes, who have enjoyed a good start to the season.
Yeah, he's done well.
But like I said earlier, it does underline Vec's point earlier on about how Gareth Southgate has limited himself in the type of player that he can select. I think he's seen over the last couple of international breaks that players such as Eric Dyer, Declan Rice, Calvin Phillips, whilst, decent players, they're just not quite doing it. And he's having to find a way to try and pick new players to try and get at different end results, which may work. Jude Bellingham may end up being the best player ever, and we just wouldn't know. But I would just say change the system and play the players who've earned a spot in that league, in that team. More on the point, I think pressuring him now is just going to hinder his development.
Yeah, and I wonder if his selection is really is it one of those he's actually going to get game time, or is it just one of those selection where he's just introduced him to the England setup, one of those ways kind of familiarise him with the surroundings? Because who was omitted? I think it was James Ward-Prowse. Injury.
Barnes, yeah,
and I know he did have a little bit of game time in one of the previous fixtures, Ward-Prowse, but I'd be surprised if Bellingham comes in and starts a game or gets a good chunk of playing time. For me, it seems like it's one of those where he's going to be training with the England team, getting a feel for the environment, which I think Southgate will probably tell you will benefit him for the future. If that's the way I kind of see it anyway. I'd be shocked come Sunday. I think they play Belgium. I'd be shocked come Sunday if he's anywhere near that starting 11 or even getting very many minutes.
Do you see that then? If that's your view on his selection, do you see that as a concession of the group?
I don't know. Sometimes it just happens, though, doesn't it? I'm trying to think of. I can't think off the top of my head other occasions where they've done that, but you would think leaving someone like James Ward-Prowse out, like you mentioned, Reece, it seems like the best thing to do was to pick a like-for-like player that's going to potentially play. But I just don't see, in that respect, why Jude Bellingham would be brought in to do that. That's the only thing I could see it being, is him being brought in just to say, look, this is what's going to be coming for you in the future. Because, like you said, Reece, he's played one 90-minute game for Dortmund. You mentioned the point about Laporte earlier, selection criteria. You can't be picking somebody to come in and potentially play who's only played one 90-minute game and is 17 years old. And then to say, if you're good enough, you're old enough, but there's not really enough evidence to say that he's good enough to step into those shoes of an England setup.
Yeah. More on that point as well. I mean, you've got people like John Joe Kenny. He was. I mean, I'm not saying he should have been picked, of course not. But the point I'm trying to make is he was out in the Bundesliga. He played every game for Schalke, and he was overlooked on an international level. So it just playing for a decent club does not entitle you to get into the England fold.
Yeah, it's interesting how he's been fast-tracked. Obviously, we'll keep an eye on it, and we can always come back to that next week as well. But it's good. I'm glad we touched upon it because that was another interesting piece of international news. Becky, you said you had some questions for us as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, I did have one question from the group of lads that I'm with here. So, quite a few of them like football. I got asked something a bit interesting today. It was, and I thought, I won't think about that too much. I'll just bring it up to you guys and see what you think. So, we were just generally speaking about sort of the top six mix, the bigger clubs. And one of the lads here asked me, who do you think is most likely to win the Premier League again first out of United, Arsenal and Chelsea, and why? Out of those three.
Okay.
In an order, you put Arsenal last, just because Arsenal don't have the mentality nor the financial capability to quickly put themselves at the top of the pile. Now, out of the two, Man United and Chelsea, I mean, it's an interesting comparison because in recent years, Roman Abramovich seems to have lost his ability to throw money consistently at the club, whereas Manchester United really do spend the money, but on all the wrong players. I think Chelsea have a manager who the players like, the players believe in. I think they play a decent brand of football. I think they've got some very, very good world-class players. And they've got some key players who are the correct players in the right areas, as well as having a decent amount of depth. In its current state, Chelsea would win the league first. But Man United have the ability to just throw money at their team until they were back at the top of the pile. I wouldn't be surprised to see Chelsea challenging for the league this season.
Okay. Yeah, well, do you know what? I'll go against the grain with Reece then. I'll say United. From a bias standpoint, I think eventually at United it will click and they will get it right whenever that may be. I just don't know. Chelsea are a good side, but I just get a feeling that they're kind of still missing something. There's some sort of balance that's missing, and they're finding it difficult to incorporate Mount and Ziyech and Pulisic and Havertz and Werner all in the same side. And whilst they do have a lot of depth, when all those players come back, as they showed at the start of the season, there is an issue with balance that Manchester United ironically have as well. But if you were to ask me who will win it first, I think United, yeah, especially when Pochettino comes in, and takes over. So, yeah, I would go United.
You kind of segued into the point I was going to make there, and I think it's difficult to foresee any of those three teams winning the league at the moment purely because of the managers they've all got. I highlight more Lampard and Solskjaer. I can't really envisage a scenario where I see Chelsea winning the league under Lampard or United winning it under Solskjaer, which is the main problem for me at the moment. Arteta. The jury's out on that one. We need to see more. He needs a full season under his belt before I make a judgment on Arteta as a whole. But each of those clubs are all being run by an ex-player. Some would say loyalty. Some would say they'd had it on merit. There's different opinions on that. I would agree with Reece in terms of I would put Arsenal last just because their reluctance to spend money. And it is a bit of a toss-up between Chelsea and United. I think Chelsea, as it stands, are a little bit closer than United. They have less holes to plug. But I think, like you say, with United's ability to throw money at it, if they can make 2 or 3 Bruno Fernandes kind of scale impact signings, then they could do wonders. But again, like Reece said, we made many valid points here. They love to throw a lot of money on the wrong things and the wrong players. So maybe they'll eventually get it right. I'm edging a bit towards Chelsea. But Chelsea do things in random patches, don't they? They'll win the league and then they won't get anywhere near for the next 3 years. And then they'll win it again in 5 years. So as a one-off, I would say Chelsea's probably closer.
Yeah, good question now, whoever that was. Very good question. Anything else, lads, you want to bring up before we go?
Yeah, I wanted to get you guys your opinion on the upcoming internationals. We don't usually do international coverage, but there's actually 2 massive games this week. In that Northern Ireland are playing Slovakia, and Serbia are playing Scotland. And for Scotland especially, I think that would be if they could win that, then just for reference for those who don't know how the current system works. If either of those teams win either of those matches, then they will directly go through into the Euros. So, especially for Scotland, it would be massive. But I wanted to see what you guys thought, the outcome of those games might be.
It's hard, isn't it? It's hard. I want all the home nations to be at the Euros because it makes it more interesting, especially next summer if we can get fans back in stadiums as well and people allowed to travel. Obviously, we won't go into the COVID vaccine thing too much, but where the Euros are next June, July, we got a little bit of time. We've got a 6-7 month period where hopefully things will start to ease up a little bit and I don't know if normality will resume. Maybe we could even get stadiums half full or a quarter full, but at least some sort of fans there. So I'd love it if Scotland and Northern Ireland done it. Will they do it? It's a big ask. It's a real big ask. Northern Ireland have probably more of a chance. Scotland, when it comes to these big occasions, they just seem to always miss out. They seem to be lacking. I don't want to call it minerals because I know plenty of Scottish lads that they're tough bastards. Like they're not short of minerals. But it's that finesse that carries you forward into tournaments. That guy that can pick a lock. That guy that can have a bit of magic. I don't know if Scotland really have that. I mean, Robertson at left back is good, right? But he's about the most creative player they've got, unless I'm mistaken. Say again, sorry?
Well, nothing wrong with a bit of McSauce, Scotty McSauce.
Yeah. Nah.
I mean, look, I'd have to disagree with you, Spooner. I think that, you know, Serbia are on paper, at least on form. You might argue that they're the stronger team, but they've got a lot of players who just have not been in strong form for the last couple of years, and they've fallen off it from an international perspective. And Scotland, there's something happening there. There's something happening at the Scotland team. I think they lost 4-0, I think, to Israel a couple of years ago, or Cyprus, or a country of that ilk, and something changed. And they've got this nucleus of players now who, yes, they're not world-class players. They're people like Scott McTominay, but they're players that can do a job. You know, you've got players like Scott McTominay, like I mentioned. You've got John McGinn. You've got the young lad at Chelsea, and you've got Billy Gilmore, Robertson, Trippier, McBurney, players that can do a job, players that like playing with each other. So I don't think it's a done deal. I think they're in it, and it's the biggest game in my view, it's the biggest game that they'll have in their career.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's very doable, and it wouldn't surprise me to see them, either of them, get through. But every time I try to get behind Scotland, the Republic of Ireland, and Northern Ireland, it doesn't go well. They just always seem to be underwhelming in the past. And I know you're saying something's happening, and I hope it is. But yeah, it's always been very underwhelming, my support of these other nations, because these sort of tricky games. Because you mentioned Serbia aren't exactly what they were, and I agree. But it's still a team of a lot of experience, who have been a lot further, more often than what this Scottish team has, for example. And like Spooner said, I can definitely see Northern Ireland doing it. I just got a feeling that Scotland are just going to do another Scotland, and they're going to get close, and they're just going to get turned over to the more experienced side. I hope it doesn't happen, and I hope it's a start of something a little bit better for them. But yeah, it's just always underwhelming whenever I watch any of the Northern Republic of Ireland or Scotland. Sadly.
Yeah. Northern Ireland, just going off of, it's difficult to go off past form, but they've had a few upsets over the past few years, and they've rose to the occasion. And I'm just more likely to back them than I am Scotland. But with that being said, I hope they both do it. I don't care how they do it, as long as they do it. Yeah, as long as they get the result, that's the main thing. There we are then. All right, lads. So, right, internationals aside, we'll leave FPL till next week, because obviously we'll need to see how these injuries play out. And I'm obviously wild carding next week as well, just giving you the heads up too, lads. So, don't be surprised if I do a Vecchi and run away with all the points this week, or next week, should I say. But yeah, anything else before we go, gents? Nothing? No? Superb. Excellent. All right, so you've watched us. The next step is to subscribe to the channel, like the video, add us up on all the social media platforms, and, chat with us. We're always available. We're always free. And we'll be back next week with all the news and the views. So we'll see you next time, people. Take care.